Let's talk a little bit about mortises or recesses, assuming that you've decided to use a mortise instead of a tenon. Um, I've shown here some examples of what a mortise would look like on typically you see them on plates or platters like this one, and the Moroccan blue bowl here. This is a little bit different size bowl, a traditional size bowl, but I opted to use a mortise on that one instead of a tenon. But assuming that you've decided that you want to go ahead and use a mortise or recess, one of the first considerations is what width do you make it? Obviously, a number of things affect that. The type of wood, the condition of the wood, the size of the blank, the grain orientation, what your plan is, all those things impact what size you make it, as well as a pretty important consideration, the size chuck jaws you have available to you. The basic operating principle, though, is generally, as with tenons, wider is better. And let me give you a quick illustration of why. This piece on the left here is a little over 12 inches wide. If I were to use a mortise that was only an inch wide and tried to put that on chuck jaws like this, the amount of racking force that would exist on that tiny little mortise with a piece that wide, it would substantially increase the likelihood that the mortise would fracture during turning. On the other hand, if I were to use a chuck that was much larger, this is a 100 millimeter chuck, so you're talking about almost 4-inch wide mortise, similar to this one here. That gives you way more stability. Obviously, this is a large mortise on a smaller piece and a small mortise on a larger piece. So I don't always follow the rules that one ought to follow. This was a fairly thin piece, so really the small mortise was okay. Probably should have been a little bit bigger. This one didn't have to be this big, but because of the heft of the piece, if you were to see it on the other side, it makes it a lot more stable if it has a wider base. So anyway, you have to make the decision as to how wide to make it, but again, as I said, as with tenons, wider is better. It gives much more likelihood that the mortise is going to survive the turning process if you use a wider one rather than a narrow one. Now, the next question is if you're going to be using a particular set of jaws, exactly how wide do you make it? Let's just use this one as an example, 100 millimeter set. This generally what you would do is to measure the width of your jaws when they're fully closed. If you're going to be using a mortise, you measure them fully closed. This is about 3 3/4 inches, so I'd make the mortise only slightly more than this, such that when I open those jaws up in expansion mode, it would only open a little bit. That would mean that the jaws are biting on the outside right along the outer edge here without grabbing on corners or anything else. It gives you the tightest possible fit in that mortise if these jaws are only expanding a little bit, because they are at a perfect circle when they're open about 1/8 of an inch or slightly less. These were cut on out of a solid billet of steel, and the saw blade width in the center here is 1/8 of an inch or a little bit less. So they're at a perfect circle when these are open just a little bit. So that's what you want to try to emulate when you're making your mortise. Try to make them just a little bit bigger than this and then expand into that. So it only has to open up a little bit to be fully expanded. That'll give you the tightest hold. All right, so that's the width. The next question is how deep do you make it? Well, as you can see from most of these are all about 1/8 of an inch deep. They really don't need to be much deeper than that. Again, it depends on the size of the piece, the type of wood, condition of the wood, all that stuff. Most people tend to shoot for between 1/8 and 1/4 of an inch. I try to keep it 1/8 to 3/16. but doesn't need to be terribly deep. A 1/16 isn't enough, I don't think, unless you have a really unusual piece of wood. But I would certainly try to shoot for 1/8 to 3/16, and that ought to be more than deep enough. Again, depending on the heft of the wood, the size of it, the condition of the wood, that kind of thing. All right, the next issue is what shape should the inside of the mortise take. It needs to be shaped the same as the outer profile of your jaws. For example, this 100mm jaw set, as you can see in the, if I can get that set up right, you can see that has dovetails on the outer edge right here. It's a dovetail profile. So you would cut the inside to roughly that same dovetail angle. These are, as Nova jaws, these are about 15 degrees. I think Vicmark is very similar. They're 13 degrees. So you have to play with a little bit to get the exact angle that you want, because you want it to match it as much as you can. So make sure that your profile is cut on the inner edge here to the same angle that you have, assuming that you have a dovetail profile. There are some jaws, like I think some one-way jaws have a straight profile on the outside with a small bite ring here, where you would cut the sides here straight and put the jaw in and tighten it up, and that bite ring digs in. That's pretty unusual. Most jaws don't have that. Most jaws have dovetail profiles on the outer edge. So 99 times out of 100, I think you're going to be using a dovetail profile. You can cut that with pretty much any tool. I think a lot of folks just use a skew to do it, a small skew. But again, you can cut it with a million different kinds of tools. And on various videos, you'll see turners use pretty much anything to cut that dovetail profile. So, and they make specialized tools that are pre-ground at exactly the 15-degree angle. So you can also use one of those tools. One of the other considerations in the shape of the mortise is that there needs to be a flat area right adjacent to the dovetail cut on the outer rim here, because you want the top of your jaws to mate flat against the bottom of the bowl, at least where those jaws contacted. There needs to be a flat area. It can't be angled in any way. It needs to be dead flat, because the security of the hold comes from the top of these jaws mating firmly against the flat area of the recess. So make sure that you've got a flat area at least as wide as the width of your jaws here, and obviously that width is going to vary depending on the jaw set that you have, but try to make sure there's a flat area the same width as these jaws right next to the dovetail profile on the outer rim. Obviously you can do whatever you want beyond that. Doesn't have to be flat all the way across. As you can see here, you can decorate the center, and that's fine, but make sure there's a flat area right around the outer rim to accommodate the flat top of the jaws. One other issue to address is the width of, I guess this one would probably be the best one to talk about, the width of wood that you leave to the outer edge of the dovetail profile. How much should you leave? And again, that is largely dependent on the type of wood, the weight of the piece, the grain orientation, et cetera, et cetera. You don't want to leave this real thin right behind the dovetail where it's expanding outward. Again, wood is stronger in compression than it is in expansion. So there would be a great tendency to blow out that recess if you left this very thin, if you left this only 1/8 of an inch thick, as opposed to this, which is almost, well, it's probably 3/8 of an inch. You need to leave enough wood so that the recess will be stable and won't be likely to blow out. And also make sure you remember you want the piece, when you set it on a flat surface, to only touch on the outer rims. So whatever ring to base or whatever profile you use for the base, make sure it is angled inward so that it's only going to sit on the outer rim of this piece. All these are slightly angled inward, this one and the Moroccan Blue Bowl as well. They're all angled inward so that they only rest on the outer edge, gives you much more stability, and the likelihood it's going to not rock in future years when you set it on a flat surface.